The Peruvian Congress sought this Monday for debate and vote a second motion of presidential vacancy for alleged moral incapacity filed against Pedro Castillo. The Kremlin expressed concern regarding the latest statements by the U.S. President Joe Biden of his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, which it considers alarming. In China, the eastern half of Shanghai went into lockdown to curb the nation's biggest COVID-19 outbreak. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the Telesur headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. In Peru, President Pedro Castillo disqualified accusations and called for ruling out vacancy. The president refuted the grounds of the proposal and pointed out that it is based on journalistic versions and uncorroborated statements. The executive pointed out that the vacancy became, since his elections, the central axis of the political and journalistic agenda. He stressed that the rejection of the motion will not mean the cessation of the ongoing investigations and ratified his willingness to continue collaborating with the investigations regarding alleged corruption and other charges. In Bolivia, relatives of the victims of the Sencaba massacre that occurred in late 2019 mobilized in the city of La Paz to demand justice as the hearing against former Senator Janine Áñez for the coup d'etat against Evo Morales case continues. The relatives of the victims of the massacres held several vigils in the capital La Paz, the most important one outside the Miraflores women's prison where Janine Áñez is serving a year of prevented imprisonment. Demonstrators labeled Áñez as murderer. They gathered shortly before the beginning of the oral arguments in a trial session carried out in line. The protesters demanded 30 years in prison for Áñez, who suffered an anxiety attack, therefore said the trial to be postponed until April 4th. Francia Márquez, candidate for vice president of Colombia for the left-wing coalition Pacto Histórico, denounced being a victim of death threats and demands that the government guaranteed her and her family's safety. The environmental activist took to Twitter to demand that she had not only been a victim of slander and racist remarks, but had also received death threats on 2 occasions along with other social leaders. Márquez asked the Colombian prosecutor's office to carry out an investigation and hopes that on this occasion impunity does not prevail. Francia Márquez and Gustavo Petro led the latest polls to win the country's presidency in the first round of the coming May 29th presidential elections. Brazil's Minister of Education, Milton Ribeiro, resigned on Monday amid serious allegations of corruption, which also include evangelical pastors who are part of President Jair Bolsonaro's political base. Ribeiro, who is also pastor of a presbytery church and was the first occupant of that office since 2019 after the far-right leader came to power, has faced these accusations since last week after an audio obtained by the newspaper Folha de São Paulo reveals Ribeiro comments that the budgets of the Ministry of Education have among its priority projects promoted by pastoral of Pentecostal churches aligned with the government, which promote an investigation by the Public Prosecutor Office. Ribeiro took over the education portfolio in July 2020 for economist Carlos Alberto de Coletti, who was in office for only 5 days after and resigned amid allegations of false hopes and his resume. On early February, the prosecutor's office also investigated Ribeiro due to his homophobic comments regarding poor LGBTQI families, which has called unfitting. Honduras Supreme Court of Justice ratified today the extradition of former President Juan Orlando Hernandez to the United States, who is accused of 3 crimes associated with drug trafficking. 15 magistrates reportedly rejected the appeal presented by the defense, exhausting the possibilities that Hernandez could stay in Honduras. The former Honduran president will be proposed in a court on the Southern District of New York. The extradition requested by the U.S. Justice is considered by some analysts as geopolitically motivated, since in their words, it was the U.S. government who helped him become a dictator. When Orlando Hernandez was captured last February 2015 after he voluntarily left his home in Honduras capital. In El Salvador, the police counted at least 87 violent deaths during the last 3 days, despite the state of exception and the mass capture of gang members. The incident started on Friday, while by Saturday, only 62 homicides were registered, the highest number in the recent history of the country in a single day. The authorities have not explained the reasons for this violent escalation, which is attributed to the gangs, mainly to Mara Salvatrucha group. Likewise, the National Civil Police reported 600 people detained due to the increase in murders. Those detained as a result of a state of exception could be under administrative arrest for 15 days and without the right to defense during the time the extraordinary measures is enforced. A state of exception law was approved by Congress at the request of President Nayib Bukele. Shifting topics, in Ecuador, authorities report nearly 356 affected people after the earthquake of magnitude 6.0 on the richest scale registered in Esmeraldas, a coastal province of that country. After the new evaluation carried out following several aftershocks, the National Service of Risk and Emergency Management issued a report detailing that the material damage included 2 houses destroyed and 87 affected, as well as 5 public buildings, 2 health centers, 6 schools, and a bridge. It was also reported that the consequences of the tremor included 1 person who died due to a heart attack. This earthquake was registered on Saturday night at a depth of 10 kilometers and at 79 kilometers from the city of Esmeralda. The shake was felt more than 60 cities and 11 of the 24 provinces of this Andean country. In Ecuador still, the death toll rose to 4 as a result of landslide caused by heavy rains that hit the parish of Cuenca, south of the country. During the reports from local authorities, 2 bodies were found on Sunday during search and rescue operations in Sayayus sector of the parish. The Ministry of Transport and Public Works stated that the heavy rainfall caused a stream to overflow and block roads. At the same time, the fire department reported that about 15 houses were affected, while others have been covered by mud and rocks, and about 250 people have been evacuated. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. In Russia, presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Monday the Kremlin is concerned about a new statement made by U.S. President Joe Biden on his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. Biden said Putin should not remain in power because of his action against Ukraine. Therefore, said Peskov, such a statement is cause of alarm, and he said that Moscow will continue to carefully study any future statements by President Biden. Because of this, the Russian foreign minister told U.S. ambassador to Russia, John Sullivan, that the unforeseen statement by the U.S. president could cause diplomatic relations between the two nations to be severed. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov ruled out that Russia's military operation in Ukraine had led to the international isolation of Moscow and said his nation has good relations with many countries of the world. In statements to the press, Lavrov said that the idea of Russia being isolated internationally is promoted by those who limit their ideologies to the dictatorship of the West. Lavrov also said that over 500 years of Western domination are coming to an end, and that a new era of multipolar world order is taking shape. This top diplomat also said his country has many partners in Asia and the Pacific region, as well as in Africa and Latin America, with whom it maintains good relations. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez said that his organization is seeking a humanitarian ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine.
It will allow essential humanitarian aid to be delivered and enable civilians to move around safely. It will save lives, prevent suffering, and protect civilians. I hope a ceasefire will also help to address the global consequences of this war, which risks compounding the deep hunger crisis in many developing countries that already lack fiscal space to invest in their recovery from the pandemic and now face soaring food and energy costs.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said a meeting between President Vladimir Putin and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky should be well prepared and have clarity on the outstanding issue between the countries.
He said he never turned down a meeting with President Zelensky. The only thing he considered fundamentally important is that these meetings should be well prepared. Now the situation is so complicated. The crisis situation in Ukraine, the conflict inside Ukraine, it has matured for so long. All these years that a huge number of problems that accumulated. So just meeting and changing, what do you think and what do I think, will be simply counterproductive.
On Monday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said he will meet briefly with Ukrainian and Russian delegations ahead of their talks aimed at the ending of the conflict.
The Russian and Ukraine delegations who are conducting the ceasefire and peace talks will come together again tomorrow in Istanbul. We will briefly meet with the delegations ahead of their meeting. I can say that the telephone traffic will engage with Mr. Putin and Mr. Zelensky is ahead in a positive direction.
The United Arab Emirates called on Western nations Monday to be reasonable in their expectations as not OPEC countries can replace Russia's oil production. The United Arab Emirates Energy Minister Sohail Al-Moussared said Russia is an important member and its production cannot be replaced by any other member countries unless someone is willing to contribute with 10 billion barrels. Al-Moussared also stated that despite growing calls for increased production, the member countries are facing a natural reduction in their production due to the decline in long-term investment in the oil business.
I think the organization will stay. Russia is an important member, and leaving the politics aside, that volume, as I mentioned, is needed today. And unless someone is willing to come and bring 10 million barrels, we don't see that someone can substitute Russia.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas criticized Sunday the West's double standards that he said penalized Russia over its special operation in Ukraine, while ignoring Israel's crimes against the Palestinian people. The statements came at a joint press conference with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
The current events in Europe have shown blatant double standards, despite the crime of the Israeli occupation that amounted to ethnic cleansing and racial discrimination, as recognized by human rights organizations, in addition to the attack of sanctions and the lack of the respect for international law. We find no one who is holding Israel responsible for behaving as a state above the law. The continuation of the unilateral Israeli measures will soon lead to the implementation of the decision of the Palestinian Central Council. What is happening in Palestine cannot be tolerated, and international law cannot be separated.
Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Sayed commented this recent meeting between Arab countries and Israel, highlighting that holding these meetings without ending the Israeli occupation is an illusion.
The meanings of Arab normalization without ending the occupation are nothing but an illusion, a mirage of a free reward for Israel. We warn against Israel's continued aggression against our land and our sanctuaries, and allowing citizens to enter Al-Aqsa Mosque. This matter is no longer tolerated, and our people in Jerusalem will remain, as always, on the lookout for all attempts that inevitably lead to an unprecedented escalation, especially since we are days from the land day. It is the blessed month of Ramadan.
And we have more news coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. In China, the Eastern Hall of Shanghai waiting to lock down to curb the nation's biggest COVID-19 outbreak. Local authorities announced that it will carry out a two-phase lockdown in the city of around 25 million people to carry out mass testing. Shanghai became China's COVID hotspot on Monday, and another record high was reported with 3,500 new confirmed cases. The area lockdown is Recep Eastern District, which includes the main international airport and glittering financial district. The lockdown will last until Friday. Ghana is the latest African country to ease its COVID-19 rules. The president Akufo-Addo announced an update of the measures set to take effect on March 29th. The measures include the opening of sea and land borders. All in-person activities, such as those taking place in private parties, churches, mosques, cinemas, are to resume at full capacity as long as the audience are fully vaccinated. Outdoor functions at sporting events, entertainment spots, rallies, and funerals might also resume at full capacity. Travelers going to Ghana who are not fully vaccinated still need to provide a negative PCR test of no more than 48 hours and will need to undergo an antigen test upon arrival. The wearing of face masks is no longer mandatory. The United Nations World's Intellectual Property Organization is presenting the gold medal for inventors to the developers of 4 Cuban COVID vaccines on Monday in Havana. The medal is awarded by the United Nations Director General Darren Tan, who is heading a delegation visiting the Caribbean nation's capital. The gold medal program was established in 1979 with the purpose of stimulating innovating activities worldwide, particularly in developing countries, and severs to attract and increase public recognition of inventors and their work. Djibouti's President Ismail Omar Guelleh met Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in Addis Ababa. On Sunday, the president led in Addis Ababa for 2 days state visit in Ethiopia. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed received him to the Bullet International Airport and announced welcoming on his Twitter page shortly after Guelleh's arrival. The two leaders held talks on bilateral, national, and regional issues of common concern. In recent years, the two African countries have been pushed to further bolster their multifaceted cooperation on their economic and security areas, among others. Early this month, the defense chief of Ethiopia, Abiy, reached an agreement to work on security, education, training, and peacekeeping jointly. Meanwhile, the first Ethiopian Abiy Fruits and Vegetable Forum was held in Addis Ababa last week.
The security and the stability of Djibouti, as well as the unity and the stability of Ethiopia, is fundamental to both countries' joint interest, and the two leaders also exchanged on mutual cooperation on this field.
The two leaders discussed all issues relating to bilateral cooperation. We discussed about the energy, we discussed about water, how to promote trade through upgrading the performance of the logistics, the ports, the road. You know, Djibouti and Ethiopia has very integrated economies. Sometimes we are also quoted as a role model. Today, the visit of the president was really very successful.
Millions of workers began a nationwide 2-day strike across India on Monday to express their anger at the government's economic policies and to back demands for improved rights for industrial workers, employees, and farmers. About a dozen of the country's labor unions organized a strike. They want the government to provide universal social security cover for workers in the vast unorganized sectors, hike the minimum wage under its flagship employment guarantee program, and stop the privatization of public sector's bank. All Indian Trade Union Congress, one of the largest trade unions in the country, said it was expecting more than 200 million formal and informal workers to join the strike. The demonstrations were planned in New Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, and other major cities. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi will chair the third meeting of Foreign Ministers of Afghanistan and neighboring countries in the Nanjing province on March 30th through the 31st. The Chinese Foreign Minister said his Afghan counterpart has been inviting them to participate at the meeting to be attended by the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Iran, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. They also said that at the meeting, Beijing hopes to promote a greater consensus on Afghan issues and discuss the plan of the neighboring countries aimed at achieving stability of the country, which is facing a humanitarian crisis resulting from 20 years of war promoted by the U.S. In this regard, China urged the U.S. to take responsibility for the economic reconstruction of Afghanistan and call on the international community to provide more support to the Afghan people. The North Korean government defends the right to develop its military capability for defense purposes. The chair of the State Affairs Department of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Kim Jong-un, reaffirmed his country's determination to build a powerful defense capability to ensure the security and future of the country. In this regard, Kim Jong-un, who is also the General Secretary of the ruling Workers' Party of Korea, stressed the need to continue achieving goals of national defense construction and develop more powerful means to equip the army. He said this is a way of freeing the countries from all kinds of threats, preserving peace, accelerating socialism construction, and further perfecting the country's nuclear war deterrence. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our social medias. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram as well. From Telesur English and from the South, I'm Ana Marrero, and thank you for watching.